The moment he said, "Put your hands where I can see them," I knew this wasn't about safety. It was about control. I was just standing there, leaning on my cane, waiting on a ride like any other tired man on a Tuesday afternoon, and somehow that was enough to make me a problem. Yeah, that happened. I had just come out of physical therapy, hip aching like it always does when the weather's warm, shoulder tight from old damage that never really healed, right? And all I wanted was to get home, sit down, maybe heat up something simple, and not talk to anybody for a while. You know what I mean? Just one quiet evening. But instead I got a young officer walking up on me like I owed him something, like my existence needed explaining. "Hands out of your pockets," he said again. Sharper this time, stepping closer like he was trying to shrink the space between us on purpose. I looked at him, took a second, not out of fear, but out of patience, because I've learned over the years that reacting too fast only makes things worse. "I'm waiting on an Uber," I told him, calm, steady, nothing aggressive in my voice. I haven't done anything wrong. That should have been enough. It should always be enough. But he hit me with that line they like to use when they don't actually have a reason. "You match the description." I remember thinking, what description of a man standing still, of someone minding his own business? But I didn't even get the chance to ask it all the way before he cut me off again. "Turn around. Face the wall." Now here's the part that really matters. I shifted my cane just a little and told him straight, "Officer, I can't do that without falling. I need this cane to stay upright." I wasn't being difficult, I wasn't arguing, I was explaining something real about my body. But instead of hearing me, he squared up like I had challenged him. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Funny thing about that sentence, it always comes from the person making it hard. I let out a small breath and said, "No, you are." And that's when I saw it in his face, that little switch flip. He wasn't listening anymore, he was reacting. And once that happens, things start sliding fast. "I need your ID," he said. I told him I wasn't driving. He didn't care. I told him I was standing on a public sidewalk. He didn't care. I told him I wasn't required to identify without a reason. He didn't care. What he cared about was winning whatever argument he thought we were in. "You're detained," he said, just like that, like saying it made it true. I asked him why. He said obstruction. I asked what I was obstructing. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, hand hovering near his belt, voice louder now, like volume could replace logic. I could feel people watching at that point. A woman off to the side had already pulled out her phone. A couple of guys near the storefront slowed down, pretending not to stare, but staring anyway, because everybody knows when something's off. You can feel it in the air. I told him again, slower this time, "I am disabled. I am not resisting. I am not threatening you. I am waiting on a ride." I thought maybe if I made it simple enough, clear enough, he'd step back. But instead, he leaned in like I had just insulted him. "Last warning," he said. And I remember thinking, last warning for what? Standing, breathing, existing in a way he didn't like. He grabbed my arm. First thing out of my mouth wasn't anger, wasn't panic. It was "watch the shoulder," because I knew what was about to happen. I've lived in this body long enough to know exactly how fragile certain parts are. But he didn't care. He yanked it anyway, hard, fast, like he had something to prove. Pain shot through me so sharp it felt like fire under the skin, like something tearing loose that had no business tearing anymore. My cane dropped, rolled away, and suddenly I was off balance, trying to stay upright with one arm twisted behind me and the other about to follow. "I told you," I said through my teeth, trying not to lose it right there. "That shoulder is reconstructed." He hit me with "stop resisting," like it was automatic, like he had already decided what story he was going to tell. I wasn't resisting, I couldn't have if I tried. I was just trying not to fall. People started speaking up then. "He said he's disabled," someone yelled. Another voice joined in, then another. I heard a phone camera get closer, and you'd think that would slow him down, you'd think being watched would make him reconsider. But no. It made him double down. He cuffed me tight, too tight, like pain was part of the process. Then he did something small that stuck with me more than the rest. He picked up my phone, saw the ride app still open, saw the car was on its way, saw the truth right there in his hand, and still chose to ignore it. Just slid it into his pocket like it didn't matter. "You're going downtown," he said, for what I asked him, for being difficult. That's what it came down to. Not a crime, not a threat, just not being obedient enough. He grabbed my cane, didn't give it back, told me to walk. I told him I couldn't without it. He said it was only a few feet. Easy to say when your body works the way it's supposed to. Every step hurt. My hip dragged, my shoulder burned. My wrists were already starting to go numb from the cuffs. And all around us, people were watching, recording, whispering, some shaking their heads, some just frozen like they didn't know what they were allowed to do. Getting into that cruiser was its own kind of struggle. I asked for a second. He pushed me down instead. Not enough to leave a mark anyone would notice, just enough to remind me where he thought I belonged in that moment. Inside the car, everything went quiet. Cold air, blasting smell of old coffee plastic seats that don't forgive anything. I closed my eyes for a second, not because I was giving up, but because I was thinking. I started going through it all in my head. What happened, what was said, what could be proven, what couldn't. Because once you've been through enough in life, you learn that surviving the moment is only half the battle. The other half is what comes after. He drove like he was trying to outrun something. Maybe it was doubt, maybe it was the realization creeping in that he'd messed up. He tried to justify it, said, "You brought this on yourself." I told him, "No, you did." And that was it. Silence after that. At the station, things finally shifted. The desk sergeant looked at me, looked at him, and you could see it right away. Something didn't add up. "What you got?" he asked. The officer ran through his list. Obstruction, resisting suspicious behavior. The sergeant looked at me and asked, "You resisting?" I told him the truth, plain and simple. Waiting on a ride explained my condition got ignored. He told the officer to take the cuffs off. No hesitation. That alone told me everything I needed to know about who actually understood the situation. When I emptied my pockets and he opened my wallet, the room changed. You could feel it. Military ID, medical card, disability paperwork. It all told a story the officer never bothered to listen to. The sergeant looked at me different after that. Not like a suspect, not like a problem. Like a person who deserved respect. Then the lieutenant came in, asked the right questions, the ones that should have been asked from the beginning. What was the legal basis? What description? Where's the report? And the officer? He didn't have answers. Just excuses that got thinner with every second. "You're free to go," she told me. I nodded, but I wasn't done. I want the report number. I want the footage preserved. I want his name in writing, because I knew this wasn't just about walking out that door. This was about what happens next. I went straight to get checked out. Shoulder worse than before, damage confirmed. Not surprising. What was surprising, or maybe not, was how fast the video spread. By the time I got home, people had already seen it, already formed opinions, already started asking questions the department couldn't ignore. I called a lawyer the next day, not because I wanted money, but because I wanted accountability. And once we started digging, it turned out this wasn't new behavior. Complaints, patterns, things that had been overlooked or brushed aside. That's the part people don't like to talk about. How often bad behavior gets tolerated until it becomes a headline. They offered a settlement pretty quick. Money conditions, silence. I said no to the silence. Because what's the point of fixing one situation if you leave the door open for it to happen again? In the end, the officer lost his job, the department changed some policies, and yeah, there was compensation. But here's the truth. Nobody likes to sit with. None of that undoes what happened. None of that gives you back the moment, the dignity, the sense of safety you had before someone decided you were a problem for no reason. Months later, I stood in front of a room full of people talking about it, and I told them something simple. I didn't win because I fought back. I won because I didn't let them rewrite what happened. I stayed calm, I told the truth, and I made sure it was seen. But here's the part I want you to think about. What if nobody had recorded it? What if that sergeant hadn't paid attention? What if I didn't have paperwork that made people take me seriously after the fact? Would the outcome have been the same? That's the question that sticks with me. So now I want to hear from you. Was what happened to that officer enough, or should consequences be harsher when someone abuses their authority like that? And be honest. Have you ever seen something like this happen where someone was judged targeted or treated unfairly just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because conversations like this, they matter more than people think.